Today on Locked On Red Wings, while the season may be ending in disappointing fashion, there are still plenty of positives with this Detroit Red Wings team.
You're Locked On Red Wings, your daily podcast on the Detroit Red Wings. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back to the Locked On Red Wings podcast. We are your hosts, Brian Fisher and Scotty Bentley. Scotty's the host over at Locked On Tigers, as well as a sports writer for C&G newspapers, while I am a color commentator for Oakland University, ACHA D1 men's hockey. And we're going to try and do something new today, and that is talk positive about the Red Wings. That's not something we've been able to do too much over the course of the last month or so, Scotty. So we kind of just got tired of being negative. We were talking to each other, going, what can we talk about and bring new to the people today? And we were like, you know what? Let's focus on some positives, because even though the season is winding down in a pretty bummer way, there are still some good things and positive signs the team is doing that we can at least, for 25 minutes or so, attach ourselves to help us get to the end of the week. And that a big part of is youth, but it's more than just that too. So before we get to that, I got to thank you guys for making Locked On Red Wings your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts, including YouTube. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. All right, Scotty. So in terms of positives with this team this season, I feel like the number one thing that a lot of people are going to be able to attach themselves to, and positive signs this team is continuing to grow, is the growth of the youth, both at the NHL level and still to come.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think that a lot of, and we'll do plenty of episodes over the summer and in the off season about, like every single thing that went right throughout the entire year. But especially, when you look at this stretch and you look at like the post Four Nations stretch of hockey where they've lost a lot of games and not very much has been going right. It is not without some of those positives. And I do think that the youth is probably the biggest part of that. Obviously, one of the biggest talking points is just going to be Marco Kasper, the versatility and production that he has shown really since the calendar year flipped over. But, in the second half of the season here, has been really solid. We've talked a lot about him playing top line wing, but now he's back at 2C, which is where he started the season, or earlier in the season, I should say, where he was playing. And it's fantastic because, and we kind of talked about this a little bit last week when he scored, is like, this is a guy who really changes the dynamic of what your team needs if he ends up being that solidified top six forward, and even more so if he ends up being a center long term.
Right, and the most exciting part about Marco Kasper's game right now is he's only scratching the surface of his talent, and a lot of his growth this season has come underneath Todd McLellan's leadership. Obviously, he was up before that, and he was playing really well, centering the third line, rotating between Berggren and Rasmussen and Tarasenko as his line mates. Every single time he was out there, because he was centering the third line looked dangerous. Well, the top line desperately needed another winger. Todd McLellan made the move to move him up there, and that was great for two reasons. One, because Marco Kasper was one of the few forwards in the bottom six who looked like they deserved a promotion. But two, it was an incredibly meaningful learning experience for Marco Kasper to learn what it takes to play in the top six. And I think that his promotion because honestly, going from top line winger to second line center is a promotion if you are a center full time. Going from top line winger to second line center, he would not have been able to handle that task if he had not already found out and gone through what it took to play that on those top 6 minutes. And I think, and I'm trying to pull it up here as we're talking, Scotty, but I believe since the new year, they've brought it up a couple times, but since the new year, he leads all rookies in goals scored with, I think, 13 or 14. I'm trying to pull it up. So Marco Kasper's growth is one of those things that you see on the ice when you're watching, but also on the stat sheet. He is, and we've talked about it so many times, right? He gets to the corners and he wins those puck battles. He wins the race to the puck first and foremost. I mean, the only thing that is his shortcoming so far, something we've talked about, is that he's just not quite strong enough yet. And I think that's what's hurting his faceoff percentage. His faceoff percentage is pretty rough on the year. But that's kind of also what makes this scratching just the surface of what he has to offer, because he's going to only get stronger in the offseason. And when he gets stronger in the offseason, he's going to come back. He's going to win more faceoffs. He's going to win even more board battles. He's going to prove himself to be even more of a valuable asset to this team.
Yeah, I think the defensive side of his game will only improve in that regard. And as you mentioned, obviously there's just a little bit more, maybe he can do more in front of the net and win more than he already is of those board battles and kind of getting into the corners and whatnot. But I think that a large part of his value comes from the fact that he is a true two-way, right? Like, this is a guy that you trust defensively and you can trust in the defensive zone. And I think as he continues to get larger, that will only help that as well, and just like natural maturing too.
Yeah, he's been great for the Red Wings, as has Simon Edvinsson. Now, this is a guy that, Scotty, we had pretty high expectations to begin with on the season, right? But just because a high draft pick is meeting your expectations doesn't mean that it doesn't deserve praise as a positive, right? He is a guy that you expected going into the year to play top 4 minutes, and we were hoping by the end of the season to play top pair minutes with Moritz, Seider. Obviously, under Derek Lalonde, that became a faster reality than expected. And honest to God, Scotty, on that top pair with Moritz, Seider, rather, he was incredible. And they were a great pair, and you saw what we had to look forward to when the rest of the defense can make do without him. And that ended up being what the problem was. McLellan came in, and now all of a sudden, okay, we need somebody else on this team, on this defense besides just the top pair. And so they had to split them up and have them play separated. And that's when we got the Albert Johansson thing, who we'll talk about in a second. But even with him maybe wearing down here towards the end of the year and looking a little bit worse than he did early parts of the season, I think he's been giving us exactly what we needed in the top 4. And I think that it's an incredibly positive sign for the same reason as Marco Kasper, right? Like, he's only going to get better. So next season, he may, but he won't as much feel the rebound effect of playing a full 82 games, and he'll be able to give us more consistent play the entire time. And even when I talk about how his play has maybe declined a little bit, that's not to say he's turned bad. He's still very good. You just see the wear and tear. He's still been our second best defenseman and is going to be our second best defenseman probably for a long time.
Yeah. Low bar there currently, but I agree with you.
He's leaping over it, though.
For sure. I think, I still have really high expectations for him going forward, and I think that this is a fine season of groundwork, right? Of just kind of like laying the foundation of what, really gaining confidence. Obviously, as you mentioned, getting used to playing a full season, et cetera, et cetera. And I'm really excited about the future of Edvinsson still, obviously, as I'm sure most people are. And I think that throughout the season, that's a guy, again, that you, when looking for the positives, you are pleased with the direction that Edvinsson is headed, for sure.
Yes, and the other thing, too, so talk about how good their pair was. The data backs that up as well. Of the defensive pairs the Red Wings have trotted out there this season, they still lead the team in expected goal share as a pair. 51.7% and 431 minutes played together as a defensive pairing. That's still better than any other defensive pairing. So it wasn't because they were playing poor they got split up. It was just they needed depth down the lineup. And the only way to do that was to split those two guys up. And so that's something that we have to look forward to as fans. And not to mention, he just got on power play unit 2 because Gustafsson got hurt. So he's got 29 points on the season right now, Scotty. The bulk majority of those points came at 5-on-5. He's going to be a 30, 35-point scorer by the end of the season here. Most of that coming at 5-on-5 before he even gets a real look. And he's gotten a real look here since Gustafsson's got hurt last week or two. But next season, when he's playing power play unit 2 more consistently, he's going to provide even more offense. So nothing but positive signs for Simon Edvinsson as a player. Same with Marco Kasper, who I think since the coaching change is pacing for like, what did I say the other day, 50 or 60 points? So both those guys there's a lot left for them to offer. And they're not alone, Scotty. There's other youth on this team who have shown positive signs as well as in the system. So we'll talk about those guys too. On the other side of this break, segment 2 of Locked On Red Wings coming up. There's nothing like watching basketball live, the energy of the crowd, the sound of sneakers on the hardwood, and maybe even a celebrity sighting courtside. If you want to catch a game in person, Game Time makes getting tickets even easier than ever. Game Time's new feature, Game Time Picks, filters out the fluff and shows you only the best deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time scrolling through thousands of tickets. When you use the Game Time app, there are going to be amazing deals on some huge upcoming matchups. I got to witness that personally when I went to the Stadium Series. I used the easy ticket shopping to just basically show me where the best deals were, and it worked out great. I got one of those super deals where Game Time highlights the deal, giving me the best bang for my buck. It was in the top 1% of deals in that section. And with peace of mind, too, the seat views let you see the seat before you buy, no surprise fees, and a lowest price guarantee you can book with total confidence. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time Picks. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game time. Segment 2, Locked On Red Wings podcast. Scotty, I think it'd be remiss of us to talk about all the youth without also talking about the kind of the diamond in the rough this season. That's Albert Johansson.
Yeah, I think that going into the year, our expectations of Aljo were very, I don't want to say low. They just weren't super exciting, right? Like, it was like, okay, if this guy's a solid third pair defender by the end of the year, like, that's a win for the organization. That's a win for the depth of the blue line. And he has certainly surpassed that and has kind of solidified himself as that second pair defenseman. Now, again, that's by comparison, right? Like, I'm sure in a perfect world, if the Wings blue line was better, that maybe that gets shuffled around and whatnot, but it doesn't really matter in the context of this year. Like, ultimately, he has done far above and beyond what we expected out of him, and I think that he is another bright spot on this team, and that is just the reoccurring theme with all of the youth, really. I mean, even the guys that are extended long-term, right? Like, Raymond had a solid year. Obviously, we already talked about Seider. Like, you have you are adding pieces to this young nucleus, and that's really exciting because I'm not sure if going into the year I would have guaranteed that a player like Aljo was going to play himself into that type of consideration, I guess.
No, I mean, we were talking about him as a third pair defenseman going into the season, and he spent a large chunk of the initial part of the season as the seventh team man under Derek Lalonde. McLellan came in and he saw the chemistry that he and Edvinsson had together from their days in Grand Rapids, and for a long time, they were a pair together, and they were a very good pair. There was a stretch there when the Red Wings were winning, they were hot, where we were like, do we have a top four? Like, do we have a serviceable top four because of this? Now, obviously, kind of like with Edvinsson, the wear and tear of the first NHL season kind of got to him. We're seeing Albert Johansson's effectiveness begin to decline. But I think, again, same situation as with Kasper, as with Edvinsson. I mean, you're going to hear me continue to say it, but they're going to have another offseason, a full offseason as an NHL player to get stronger, adjust, and get better. And I don't see any reason why Albert Johansson won't be a shutdown third pair defenseman for the Detroit Red Wings for years to come, especially because he's going to be a fairly inexpensive defenseman at that too. Like, it's not as glamorous as guys like Edvinsson or Seider are, but he is going to have a sustained role on this team, and because of how young he is, it's going to really help lock up the bottom pair going forward. Because, again, eventually players get used to playing 82 games. I mean, there's wear and tear on all of them, right? We're seeing cold snaps with Larkin and Raymond, but they're going to be able to stay consistently effective for longer, the longer they play in the league, up until, they come out of their prime. But, Albert Johansson and everyone else is just entering their prime. There's so much to look forward to with the youth on this team, and that's something that is that you can give Yzerman credit for, right? We talk a lot about criticisms of Yzerman lately, but this is something that he has done well.
Yeah, absolutely, man. And I think that you, I'm sure we're going to talk about it eventually, but like, I think that that also falls in line if you're looking for bright spots here in the second half. Like, how is Elmer Soderblom not one of the number one players on that list, right? Like, this is a guy that was,
Oh,
we've
he
said it
is.
a lot, and I know that we continue to reiterate this point, but it's worth reiterating. Like, this is a guy that was completely an afterthought in terms of future plans of the Red Wings, and that people had, I don't, given up on maybe is too dramatic, but I think that honestly might be the most accurate way to depict most people's thought of him. Was like, okay, you know, it was a fun story. He's a huge winger, haha, but like, yeah, it's not going to work out. And he has been so phenomenal that he is another guy that, again, as this youth movement continues to kind of go through and filter through, has had an unbelievable season for the Wings.
Yeah, I mean, 10 points in 23 games. That's a new career high, by the way, because he had 8 points in 21 games
Right.
the 2 years ago. He's looked completely, not completely different is not the right word, but much improved over the last stint he spent in Detroit. And as you put, you and I at the very minimum, we were like, okay, the shine's kind of rubbed off, and he might not be an NHL caliber player. Cue this year where he's one of the best players in Grand Rapids, earns his way onto the NHL roster, and then he was called up mostly because of injuries, right? But then he took that opportunity and he ran with it, kind of like Albert Johansson when Todd McLellan got here. He was playing in the third line role. Every single time he was on the ice, even though it took a while for that first goal to come, he was getting opportunity after opportunity after opportunity. He was creating offense for this team that the third line could not do before he got there, right? Because at this point, Marco Kasper's already been moved up to the top line. That third line is dead in the water. There's no offense coming from it until Soderblom gets there, creating all kinds of opportunities. Eventually gets that first goal because of injuries and whatnot. Again, he gets promoted to the top line, moving Marco Kasper to the second line center role, and now he's playing on the top line. And yeah, did he look a little like he wasn't quite a top line player? Sure, but he served himself amicably in that role and had quite a few good games before getting bumped back down the lineup, where again, he was fantastic. Think about how metal this is, Scotty. He gets hurt, comes back from injury, scores a goal, and goes, okay, I'm hurt again. Like, he's back for like 20 minutes, scores a goal, and is back to day-to-day. Like, that's pretty hardcore out of Elmer Soderblom. And
It's so metal, bro.
It's so metal.
You're such a 90s kid. Gosh.
1996, dude. That makes me old, apparently. I'm not even 30 yet. Leave me alone.
Dude, you're ancient.
Yes, I know. But yeah, Elmer Soderblom is really fun to watch just because now he's not relying on his physical gifts to get him through games. He's using it as a supplement, which is what he's going to need to do to succeed, if that makes sense. Like, before what caused him to get sent down to Grand Rapids is he wasn't moving his feet. He was relying on the length of his stick to make plays. Well, now he's moving feet. He's engaged in the board battles. He's hitting a little bit more, which is then thereby making it so he creates more turnovers with his length, and he gets more opportunities with his length and his hands because he's working harder. So, I don't know. I'm really excited for him to come back from injury. Hopefully he comes back before the season's over, and if he plays like this in training camp, there's no reason he wouldn't earn a spot on this roster coming out.
Yeah, no, absolutely, man. A solidified kind of like pillar of the bottom six that really has no issue playing up when needed as well because of the versatility and kind of the intangibles he provides.
Absolutely. All right. 19 minutes into the episode, let's go to another break because the next two guys, Scotty, I want to talk about, I don't know if they qualify as, they're in that weird zone where they're not quite youth anymore, but also not quite vets, if that's a strong hint at who I want to talk about here in segment 3. Still having great seasons. So stay tuned. Locked On Red Wings. The NCAA tournament is here, and FanDuel is giving you the chance to get in on the action like never before. Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. That's $200 extra bucks to use on everything from buzzer beaters to Cinderella stories and even who's cutting down the nets. If you got your eye on a few underdogs this year, FanDuel is going to make it easy with spreads, totals, and game props. And with tournament games happening almost every day, there's always something exciting to bet on. The FanDuel app is simple to use, and when you win, you get paid instantly, no waiting around. So visit FanDuel.com and get in on college hoops action all tournament long. Segment 3, Locked On Red Wings podcast. All right, Scotty. No surprise here. Obviously, Moritz Seider and Lucas Raymond are two players who continue to take strides forward each and every year and continue to this season.
Yeah, well, I mean, we talked about Raymond. I kind of jumped the gun on Raymond a little bit earlier, but I think that's even though there has been a little bit of dip in production, that's still a guy that's had such a phenomenal year, and I think erased any doubt that he was going to be a part of the core of this team going forward. Because there were some people, after his second year that were like, oh, like, we don't know, or that were, I don't know, even know if doubting's the right word, but you know what I mean? Like, there were people that were maybe concerned or questioning his role on the team because he went through some droughts last season. But this year, I think he has put all that to rest. He's one of the best players on the team and deserves the extension he got.
Yeah, I remember this too, right? Like, he started the season ice cold goal scoring wise, right? I think he was a point per game on assists alone.
On assists alone, yeah.
Yeah, and it took him about 10 games to get his first goal of the season, and he still has 26 on the season. He still has the ability with 8 games left to touch 30. He set a new career high with 73 points in 74 games. He's at a point per game right now, or just, as you just heard, a point beneath a point per game. So he's having the best season of his career. That's only 4 long, and you've been able to say that 3 out of the 4 years he's been here, right? He finished 4th in Calder voting in his first year, had the pretty typical sophomore slump, came back stronger, was the Red Wings MVP last year, and now this year, their leading point getter. He's been great. And obviously, right now, people are like, he's been cold. He hasn't been as productive right now. And that happens, and it sucks that it's inopportune. This time last year, he was putting the team on his back. And right now, he's just struggling to find the back of the net. I'm not worried about him in the slightest. Obviously, he's got 73 points in 74 games. He's their best player on offense, I think. And then Moritz Seider, I mean, I crashed out on social media today because I keep seeing tweets about how Moritz Seider looks like he sucks like recently. And I'm like, what are you guys watching? The game the other night against St. Louis was a defensive masterclass from the first pair. And it's like, just because players are out there doesn't mean the goals are their fault. I don't know. So Moritz Seider, we've done whole episodes on Moritz Seider and why people don't understand the value he brings. And you can check my social media if you want to see it again. But he leads the team.
You want to see the crash out again?
You want to see the crash out again? It was a crash out, but it was a factual crash out because he is the defenseman on the team who gets the most defensive zone deployments against the toughest competition. Yet, despite that, is still relative positive to his teammates on Corsi and expected goals. So, despite getting the hardest competition and the most defensive zone starts, he is still positive asset compared to his teammates who get not that kind of deployment. And then in the league, he gets the 4th most amount of his time on the ice spent against elite competition at like 41.6% of his ice time against elite competition. Meanwhile, he also leads all defensemen in points with 40. So what's not to love about Moritz Seider's game? The guy is a true all-star two-way defenseman. There's not a lot of all-star I emphasize two-way defensemen in this league. There are defensemen who get 80 points, 90 points, but they don't get the kind of tough deployment that Moritz Seider does. Plus, he's averaging 2 more minutes a night than he did last season. Last season, he was averaging 23 minutes a night, and this year's averaging 25 minutes a night. So he's being asked to take on an even bigger role than last year when we were defending him, and he's doing more with it. So, yes. Moritz Seider, huge step forward. Lucas Raymond, huge step forward. These guys are the pillars of this Red Wings core for their contention window, whenever that decides to open.
Yeah, well, on paper it should have been like now, but yes, they are going to be the pillar of this era of Red Wings hockey, and they absolutely deserve to be. And yeah, I completely agree with everything you just said. Seider is obviously one of the more valuable players on the entire team and in this entire organization for a very good reason.
Yeah. So that's it for youth. I think there's some we're not forgetting anyone. If we say that's it for youth and we're forgetting a name, people are going to come after us. So. I mean, you could talk about the prospects, right? Like, obviously that's not Red Wings right now. You could put Carter Mazur in that category too. Carter is only played the one game, made his NHL debut, but he's someone who definitely is going to be here next year, in my opinion. He's super exciting to watch. You got Nate Danielson still down there. Amadeus Lombardi, Anton Johansson, Trey Augustine is going back. You got Sebastian Coso. Like, that's the exciting part, is as much youth is still already here, Scotty. There's a ton more on the way yet.
Yeah, right. Which is why we are begging for any of these NHL moves to work. Because it's like there is a lot of good young talent that is on the Red Wings roster, and there's even more waiting in the wings that's going to come up through the system, and we're really excited about all of them. But you have to have a balance. They have to walk into a situation where there are good veterans on the team, and right now it's that core we just talked about, and then, as we've complained about a billion times, a lot of the NHL signees have not really worked out, but we're staying positive. So yes, there's a lot of really fun prospects kind of waiting in the wing as well. Like I said, this summer, I mean, we'll do probably a whole show on like everything that went right for the Wings, and then we usually do like everything that went wrong or whatever. And like there's a lot more than just the youth too. Like DeBrincat's having a fantastic season, right? Obviously. Like that's a guy that is one of the best storylines in terms of on-ice production, literally in the entire organization. Larkin doing Larkin things. Like there's it's not all doom and gloom. It's just a collapse for the third year in a row.
Right, and like certainly there's a lot of flaws with the team. Like they're missing the playoffs more than likely. So obviously there's more flaws than there are positives right now. But that's, like you said, not to say there aren't a ton of positives. You mentioned Alex DeBrincat. He's in this category. He and Patrick Kane are in the veterans category that are just like, again, they're not like surprises, so to speak. That like Patrick Kane, how he's playing right now is what you signed him to do. But it's a surprise at how he turned this season around after McLellan came in, right? We mentioned it the other day. He went from pacing for 40 points under Lalonde to now pacing for 90 points under Todd McLellan. He's back to being the Patrick Kane that we know and, well, hated for so long as a Chicago Blackhawk in terms of the type of offense he can create. And I have noticed him trying a little bit harder at 5-on-5 with the forecheck and the back check, which is much appreciated. And then, like you said, Alex DeBrincat. Alex DeBrincat this season is the Alex DeBrincat you traded for and signed from last season. He's got 33 goals this year. We signed him to be about a 35-goal scorer. He's going to be that. So those veterans for sure have at least brought what we expected here in at least the second half of the season in Patrick Kane's case.
Yeah, for sure. And obviously the power play is, again, another thing that's been fantastic on the year. And as I said earlier this week, man, it's just so mind-boggling how everything on the power play shifts around Patrick Kane. Everything. What the defense does, where the puck goes, where the wings are set up, everything revolves around getting him the puck and just letting him cook. And it works out a lot of the time. So, I think that we're going to be having a lot of discussions about the future of Patty Kane and kind of what his future is in Detroit, because I think that's probably going to be a big talking point this offseason.
Yeah, and I mean, like you said, he is kind of I don't know how much, if you were to assign a percentage, how much of the credit you'd give Patrick Kane for this power play being so lethal, but he's a big part of it, and it's the big part of why they're the third best power play in the league at 28.4%, and the best power play the Red Wings have had in franchise history. This is the best power play they've had in franchise history. The second best was 08-09 at 25.5%. They're almost 3 whole percentage points better than the last time they went to the Stanley Cup final. That's a pretty big positive.
It's wild, dude. Yeah.
Scotty, that's the positives.
Yeah, well, that's again some of the positives. Yes, there's we can save the every positive from the season for an off-season episode, but
we'll rehash this conversation once if they don't make the playoffs.
Right. Because there is, I mean, there's still plenty more that it's not like that's everything that went right this season was this, and the rest has been a disaster. So we'll definitely have a more broad conversation. But I do think highlighting the youth, especially down the stretch when there's been injuries and post trade deadline, new people in the lineup and whatnot, they've done a really good job of filling that void and producing for the team.
Yes, 100%. I'm trying so hard. My default is to want to say absolutely, but I'm trying not to say absolutely. So
absolutely.
I'm replacing it with 100% or just simply yes. So I don't know how people do this. How do people 100%? Scotty, 100%. Final thoughts.
We ball, baby.
We do ball. We'll be back with a new episode tomorrow previewing Friday's game against the Carolina Hurricanes. So stay tuned for that. Same time, same place. It's your team every day.